Do you want to know how to paint an organic face and make a really cool cowboy hat all made with plastic? Well, let me show you how. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Luke, and in this video I'm going to be taking you through how I made this bane helmet. Not really a helmet, it's more a face and a hat, but it's close enough to a helmet. We're going to be talking about the files, how I did this really cool organic face, adding a lot of Createx colors and airbrushing techniques to make something really cool like this. And then mostly we're also going to be talking about this cool hat, which has actually been 3D printed, but we've added some flocking and some fibers and some cool Alumoluster pieces over it to add a lot more texture and detail rather than maybe going out and purchasing a leather hat or just having a brown looking hat, something in the middle that you could do really, really cheap. So the first thing, as always, we need to go get some 3D files. All right, starting off with the files, you've guessed it, we're getting them from Do3D. Now, these are the bane files. As you can see, it's come in multiple separate pieces, which is perfect as always. We've got the face, we've got the dome, we've got the back, we've got some teeth, we've got like the pipes, some eyes, the classic cowboy hat, which is going to be printed. I've got some ideas on how we're going to make this look more like a hat rather than just a random old 3D print. So these files are going to be perfect as we're going to be using some like flat blacks. We're going to be doing some blues with some airbrushing to get that wrinkled detailed face that he has. We're going to be doing some details on the teeth and the gums to make them look really, really like nasty and looking, which is going to look amazing. We're going to be doing some lens, making them super shiny see-through, and the cowboy hat, like I said, which we've got some ideas, using some flocking to try and make it less like a plastic hat, but more like a real hat. Now, it would be a lie if I said that these were not printed. I do actually have the helmet right here, and it looks amazing at the moment. I did actually decide going with the neutral face because there are two faces within this pack. This is the neutral face. His mouth is a little bit less closed and his eyes are less angry looking. Everything's been taped up for the moment, but you can really see how many details and wrinkles we're going to be airbrushing into this. So the next thing we're going to need to do is talk about the paint and what paints we're going to be using, and then we'll be moving on to the hat, which is down there printing. So the helmet has now been sanded and primed. Now I will leave a link down in the video description of the video that I go through all of the sandpaper, the primers, the wet sanding, all that stuff to smoothing out prints so they're ready for paint. So the paint job for bane isn't too difficult. Mostly on the rest of it, the face is the hardest part. So for the metallic Alumoluster colors, I just went through, added some black chrome, my Elasa black chrome, or any automotive paint is gonna do the perfect same job, along with some clear coat over the top. Then sprayed some Alumoluster through an HVLP gun at a 0.6mm nozzle at about 25%. You can also do this through an airbrush if you don't have an HVLP. If you don't have either of those, I would recommend something like an automotive metallic color. Will also do the trick just the same. So then I also just clear coated these off as well. So now they are ready for weathering, where we'll go through with some steel wool and some oil-based paints. Just to finish these up, instead of being super, super shiny, I need a little bit more depth and detail into these. And that whole process also worked for his breathing tubes, which go down on his face. The next step is the dome and these back plates. These two were very easy. For that paint, I just ended up using some MTN Pro. This is just their flat black. But you can also notice there's a bit of a speckled haze through it, which I thought looked really, really good compared to his face and the hat. So for that, I just ended up using some gloss black. This was in a rattle can. I just sprayed it really far back, just did a really light mist over the whole helmet. So you've got that contrast of a flat black and then speckled gloss over the top. And then that's what gives it its sort of shine flat. Instead of using, say, a metallic paint or chip brushing over it, you've got that contrast of flat black and gloss. And that same process also worked on the back plate, which then just magnetizes on. The next step is the hat. Now, I haven't 100% finished this hat so far. So the paint that I'm using for this is just some of the MTN 94. This is just like a brown beige sort of color, which will go over the hat, and then I'll also go over just a little bit later on how we're going to be adding some flocking to this, whereas this is more just our base coat, which we'll be adding. And then the last bit is the face. Now the face, I don't know if I want to show you it right now, but I'll go through which paints I used and the techniques I did. So obviously we resin printed the face, so that barely needed a single bit of sanding. So for the paint, I just ended up using some NTN 94 Hydro Blue. This blue was sort of the one in between the middle, and I knew I could definitely weather this blue up a lot, so it would also become a little bit darker and lighter in some patches. So as you can see, this is our finished face. Now I don't have a lot of footage of it, mostly because the paint job I was just very locked in. And I also haven't set up a camera in my airbrushing box as of yet, but you can see how much depth and detail is in this thing. All of it was airbrushed besides that big blue base, which we used some MTN on, but I used just a combination of a lot of Createx colors and a lot of patience. So for around the eyes and the lips, I just ended up using some Createx opaque purple, just really lightly misting it and building up those layers to give it that sort of purple texture, which then also did have other paints go over it, and that's why it's not as visible as maybe I say I wanted it, but it really gives that nice contrast. The next step was just adding a little bit more darkers, maybe some blues through there, where I used some Createx opaque blue. Now I didn't clean out the airbrush between these two paints. I actually combined the blue with the purple, so it became a blued purple, rather than that harsh contrast of purple to blue. And that just went around the eyes a little bit, maybe around some of these wrinkles, round down the chin and up on the forehead. The second step was now starting to do this black washed sort of brown that you see over the face. And for that paint, I just used some Sapphire. This is in the Createx Illustrator range as well. This was just airbrushed on really lightly, just around the top, round in the nose, some darker spots in this face. I did also end up combining some red, some yellow, and some Vallejo like burnt umber brown to make a burnt umber, which was very, very lightly misted around those exact spots, just around some of the eyes, the mouth, the chin, and these deeper valleys, which then I also opened up really wide on my gun and sprayed to get some of these speckled freckles. I also did go through with a paintbrush and just flicking on some paint, which it got all of these speckles, which was using the combo of our brown washed and some orange and some green and some blue combined, adding all textures and details. There's a lot of playing around with it. For this being my first piece of an organic paint job, I'm pretty happy with it on how it turned out. And also my first time using some Createx colors. Now, if you do not have Createx colors, I definitely would recommend getting some. They're really easy to manipulate and add different colors and different thinners and textures and stuff. And that definitely is part of how I got it looking so good. So I will try and put as much footage of what I have up, but it's definitely a bit of an art, just playing around with different speckles and details and looking at a lot of reference images. My biggest reference image was this one by Nigel. This man is still an absolute genius and he doesn't ever want any credit, which seems ridiculous. But without him, I probably wouldn't have been able to do this. So massive thank you to him. So definitely find reference images, take your time, play around with stuff. The great thing with being acrylics, if you don't like it, just wipe it off, start again. I did make up some little mistakes just around the lip. I accidentally hit my paintbrush over it. I accidentally bled a bit too much on some spots, but it's really just a lot of fun. So that's really it when it comes to paint. This one is a bit of a different paint job because of all this organic painting, but your dome, the metallic-y cover plate up here and the hat are all just the same basic stuff that I've done many times before and you've seen me do a bunch of times before. All right, so the very last thing is our weathering. So we're going to be weathering the air respirators, the top bits, the hat, and the skull plate. Now, I won't go into too much detail just about this because this, like I have said in other builds, is from Henry Creations. I've used this on so many different builds. I've used it on K2SO, I've used it on my Death Trooper, I've used it on Warhammer, I've used it on my clone, I've used it on my Star-Lord blaster, and really, it looks pretty damn good. It sort of just takes your Illumoluster or just any paint jobs from mid's pretty good. If you put a black wash on it, it's not too bad. But you can't manipulate it where you can get these sorts of speckles and freckles and different channels and scratches all through it. Now, we'll say it does utilize some steel wool and some oil paint, some naphtha, and a little bit of creativity. But in the end, this piece looks like it's been out in the desert, it's been worn, it's seen better days, which Cad Bane has. He just goes in, does the mission, and doesn't care what he looks like at the end. So I will leave a link down in the description of that course. It is worth every cent that you will be paying because it transforms your props and your helmets from okay to pretty damn good. So without further ado, I'm just going to attach the rest of that to the helmet, and then it'll be just the hat left over, which we've got some flocking left to do. I've got to just finish painting it, and then we'll be on to it. So the very last thing is the hat. Now, Cad Bane is obviously the most iconic character with a hat. Now, I didn't want this to look, well, like it has been 3D printed. We've just painted it brown at the moment, and I didn't really want that effect. So I did a little bit of research and found this stuff. Now this is called flocking. So flocking is essentially like model railway or model dioramas, like ideal of like grass or fibers, because essentially they are very, very small fibers that you put through a sieve and onto some like PVA glue or some like specially designed glue, which is probably not worth it. I have been able to get away with it so far with just some cheap, real craft glue that dries clear. But this stuff's obviously made of fiber and hats are made of fiber. Now, it won't be the same like material, but it'll be really, really close and it gives a really good effect. Now, I've only done a very small little test just up on the top here. Now, it is really, really light. I did end up purchasing some darker as well, so I could get 2 different tones of color through here. So I think I'm gonna be putting this and the lighter brown through the sieve at the same time and shaking it over. But it's really, really easy process. It's just adding PVA glue, sprinkling it over through just a really cheap sieve, and it gives such a good effect. So I'm gonna keep trying this over the rest of the helmet and also under the hat. And then we may clear coat this in, say, a flat clear, just to lock everything. But I don't think I will. This stuff dries pretty well, and when it's dried, I can just shake off what hasn't been attached to glue. I can always do another coat if need be. And, well, that is the finished product. I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. Like, the organic face looks amazing. I'm really proud of that for being the first try. The cowboy hat actually turned out not too bad. These side details do add a lot to making the hat something other than just a very big, plain, big brimmed hat. But there are some imperfections here and there. It seems a little bit dark up on top. I ended up having to do a second coat, mostly because the first I didn't do it correctly. You should be putting the glue down first, adding a lot of the flocking first, maybe even doing a little light tap just to try and get as much of it onto the glue, and then waiting a very long time before knocking off the excess. I knocked off the excess like 2 minutes after I'd actually applied it. So learn from my mistakes, just leave on the flocking for a little bit of time and then take it off once it's fully dried. Most of it then will stick, and then you maybe don't get as many of these like weird splodges where there's maybe double layers or a little bit too much glue, not enough glue. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it. And then once we take the hat off, you can see the nice skull plate up on top. I did have some accidents with peeling paint, but I did think I fixed them. But you don't really see it because the hat goes on it. But all these breathing tubes look amazing, and all the face just makes this whole helmet. So I'm very happy with this one. This one will be going on the wall somewhere where the hat can actually sit, because that's not coming close to sitting on the wall. I hope this video helped you guys in some sort of way with making the flocking on the hat or painting really cool organic faces, which we will be doing a lot more. I have some plans for a Obi-Wan Kenobi Darth Vader with his cracked helmet, so we can see his skull and the helmet itself, which I'm very excited for. That will be coming out in a fair bit of time. I haven't planned much at all. So without further ado, let's head to the final result.